Kathryn, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
You've got a panel session later on today. What's it about?
My panel session today is on communications and advocacy in the bioenergy sector. It's an extremely important point. Technology is great. The technology is, of course, there, but we have to get beyond having great technology. We have to get consumers to buy in to bioenergy and for governments and local authorities to support bioenergy. So the communications piece is super important. I come from a background of journalism and PR, and certainly we're all about credibility and visibility.
Who's the audience that you're speaking to?
Well, today's conference, there are a lot of technical people, there are some communicators, but even the more technical people and policy people, I'm sure that they'll take home our message of the importance of credible communications.
So the credible communications, who was the audience that you're trying to reach with those communications?
We're not generally communicating directly to the consumer in this industry and in the bioeconomy in general, but the NGOs and other stakeholders are a really important relay to the public. It's very difficult for one company single-handedly to communicate to the public, except maybe in their local area or around their plant, using their employees as ambassadors and all of that. But it's so important that we have credible, coordinated messages across the bioenergy industry and across the bio-based industries in general.
Why has that conventionally been a complex problem?
I think traditionally we've always used some forms of bioenergy, if you think back to original heating with wood and cooking with wood and so on. But there's a tendency in political circles to choose one solution as the magic bullet. That's what we saw around the biofuels debate in Europe. It was identified as a really good solution, and then there was a policy and an NGO backlash when people realized that it was perhaps a little more complicated than that, certainly around first generation biofuels. So it is complex. I mean, communicating on any scientific issue is complicated, and the public likes to have simple messages, short messages. And so that's why, as communicators, it's really important for us to work with industry to define those really clear messages and to put them out.
So what of public acceptance? Do they accept the messages?
I don't think the public even knows what bioenergy is. So that's something that we already have to tackle. You might talk about a particular technology and there might be some acceptance of that. And we'll be talking about that today at the conference panel on communications and advocacy in bioenergy. But I think we're a long way from talking about public acceptance in general. And it's an important job that the industry has to do to communicate credibly towards stakeholders, towards NGOs, and to have that filter through to the public.
So you've got quite a mountain to climb for them to understand it, to then accept it. How are you going to go about that? We
work with industry to define really credible messages. So to me, the most important part of communications is defining a really credible story and to testing those messages and make sure that they stand up to scrutiny. I think many people go about communicating all wrong because they will come to us and say, you're a communications consultancy, you're specialized, we want a website or we want a brochure. It's not about that. It's really about the first step of defining a really good, solid set of messages, testing the messages, and then taking them out to the various audiences.
See, there's a certain element that will counter whatever you say. How do you address that?
I actually think it's good that there's always other arguments on the table. If you're a policymaker or a journalist, you need to have more than one source of information. I believe that we're working with the good guys in the biomaterials sector, but other industries might not be so ethical. So I do believe that the NGOs and other stakeholders have an extremely good role to play and actually embrace what they're saying. I think it's essential that they come with counter-arguments. And then as long as they're willing to engage and we can all get around the table together with our numbers and have third parties, if necessary, look into the figures, I do think it's really important. This is a democracy. We need to have all sides of the arguments represented.
To anybody who doesn't know, it's quite a complex problem, communicating these sort of things. So presumably they want some reassurance that it is effective, it is a good use of money. How do you prove that?
I think there's a lack of understanding about bioenergy and about biomaterials and bioeconomy in general. So it's going to take more than one company to try to raise awareness of the sector. What I would love to see is some European funding and some national funding being put into communications campaigns. I don't think industry can really do it on its own. But if we can show and back all of our claims up with data and science, if we can show that this is a really positive sector, that message can start to filter through. I can't really name any particularly successful campaigns to date in the bioenergy industry where we can really say that the public opinion has been swayed and people are now well informed on bioenergy. There may be some national examples, but certainly at European level, I can't think of any campaign. On the other hand, the NGOs have been quite effective towards policymakers with some really good campaigns, and perhaps if industry could start thinking more in campaigning terms, we would be a little more successful.
So to roadmap what needs to be done from this point forward, what are the next steps?
I believe the next steps for communicating on biomaterials and bioenergy are to engage with all partners, so that includes NGOs and other stakeholders, and to come with a common vision and to come with a common voice as an industry. That's where AEBIOM is important and other trade associations are important. We need to get together and share the same vision and share the same messages and find ways to filter that through to the public. But reaching the public is an extremely difficult thing to do. It's extremely costly, and no one company and no one trade association has the budget to do the massive advertising campaign or public information campaign that would be needed to really filter through, to educate kids in schools, to reach the retailers and so on.
So that all that in mind, it has to be a team effort. How do you get an aggregate, how do you become a trusted source for people to say, yes, I know this information to be true and I will believe it and follow it?
Credible communications is all about becoming a trusted source and joining forces with whichever stakeholders and whichever partners you need to get your message across. So if you want to be a believable force for change and for good, and which of course we all do, it's really important to have your data, not to make any claims that are not backed by science, that are not independently validated as needed. That's life cycle assessment and many other methodologies. But we need to come with transparent, open, honest and credible messages and have everything backed by data.
Are you seeing a gaining of momentum within both your communications and the uptake of that information?
Certainly. I mean, our business, Sustainability Consult, has been around for 8 years and we've grown steadily and organically. There's a huge interest today in communicating on sustainability, and I believe that people are increasingly aware that it's not just about making a nice, fluffy, green advertising campaign with babies and butterflies. It's really important to have solid messaging, have everything backed by data, and to work with people who understand the issues and stakeholders' concerns and know the sector. So certainly for us, I'm happy that we've specialised in biomaterials and in bioenergy, and I do see increasing demand. At the end of the day, people want to do good. People want to make a difference. And especially the younger staff members that we have, they're coming through saying, I want to work somewhere that makes a difference, where I can feel like I'm making a difference. So yeah, I believe that times are changing, the tide is turning, and I do hope that we'll all be successful in contributing to building not just better materials, but a better world.
Fantastic. Kathryn, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.